I'm going to give a little bit of an introduction to Will. I've known Will for about, has it been a year? Yeah. It's been about a year, almost a year. And he's been a dear friend of mine. And one of the things that is going to be noted in his testimony is suffering. And one thing that I have started studying is the theology of suffering. And what I've learned is that a disciple is called to a life of suffering. And not only that, in that suffering, they will get to experience what Christ experienced when he lived here on earth with us. So it's a guarantee. If you're a disciple of Christ, you will suffer. So 1, you will suffer. However, 2, your suffering will increase holiness and not detract from it. And this comes from 1 Peter. And so I would encourage you, if you are suffering, going through pain in your life, 1 Peter is a great book to study. And Will's testimony is a testimony of suffering and how he chose to suffer well. There's certain times where he didn't suffer perfectly, but he chose to suffer well, and he is still following Christ today. Because one thing I say is, when you go through things, humanly in the world, it makes absolutely no sense for you to continue to follow Jesus. It doesn't, like to the world. And the enemy is going to do all he can do to use the suffering in your life to remove you from knowing Jesus, to get you to leave Jesus, because the enemy's number one goal is to make sure your soul does not make it into the presence of God when you die. That is his number one goal. And so when you keep that in mind, when there are times when you are tempted to be like, Lord, I don't want to believe in you anymore, I want to turn away from you, know that that's the enemy's goal. He doesn't want your soul in the presence of God. And one thing I talk about is there's a difference between your strongest desires and your deepest desires. Your strongest desires are what comes up and that you think about when you're tempted fleshly. So tempted to, however it may be, tempted to not remain faithful in prioritizing the presence of God, tempted to give in to fleshly lusts and desires, tempted to hold bitterness towards a friend or a sibling. They're just fleshly things, and they seem to be your strongest desires. And so sometimes you think you are your strongest desires, but actually the Bible talks about how each and every one of us, when you decide to let the Spirit come in and take control, you are no longer your flesh, your strongest desires. You are your deepest desires, and your deepest desires is to be like Jesus and to be living in the image that he's made you to live in. And so we'll talk about that a lot this semester, your strongest desires versus your deepest desires, but you are not your strongest desires. That's one thing that has taken the weight off of my shoulders, is when I strongly desire something, I have to remember that is not me, that is the enemy. What I actually deeply desire underneath all of that is to be with Jesus. And so, Will, are you ready to come and share with us? Will is a freshman at DBU. He is an unconventional freshman, though, because he's a little bit older. He's not freshman age, but he has an amazing story that really the Lord has shaped using trials and suffering. And so if you guys could give it up for Will.
Alrighty, so I'm Will. Thank you, Mercy, for the introduction. Let's see. Yeah, I guess I started coming to Lake Church, in around September. Roughly. There's just a lot of people. A lot of my friends moved away, and I just needed a new community because I was just, home alone or whatever. But so I guess I'll open with a verse here. If y'all want to turn to Proverbs, we're going to be a lot in Proverbs and the Psalms tonight. So, yeah. So first, we're going to open up with Psalms 3, 5 through 6. And I was just really challenged.
Sorry, that was calling me.
Nope, we're all good. First, I was just really challenged when I was doing this to through all of this. And I think Proverbs 3, 5 through 6 makes the most sense to me. It says, trust in the Lord with all your heart and do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways, acknowledge him and he will make straight your paths. So, okay. So, I guess I'd say I'm pretty blessed. I think it's actually me. I don't know why. I would say I'm pretty blessed that I got to live in a very loving Christian household. I had both parents my whole upbringing, and they both poured into me a lot, and were just very much like, hey, Will, whatever you want to do, we'll support you, and we'll pray with you. And they were never, trying to, whatever. So, and they always prayed for me, me and my brother, and were always just really cool people. So, I guess, yeah. So, halfway through my senior year, my dad unexpectedly passed away from a heart attack. Why? No one really knows. It just he just was getting up ready for work, and yeah. And I just remember, I guess he passed away about 8 o'clock that morning. It was the Tuesday after MLK Day. I will never forget it. January 17th, I believe. And yeah, and I just remember, I remember going there, and it's like 8:30 in the morning, and I'm driving to Arlington Memorial, and I'm like, it's already a long day. Like, I haven't even brushed my teeth yet. I haven't even taken a shower. Like, I'm just ready to go home. But I remember on the way to the hospital just praying. And I remember even in the time when the paramedics and the firefighters were at our house, that I was just praying, that was like, God, I hope that, obviously, one, it was like, man, I hope like Dad's okay, like I hope you perform a miracle. But then after I received the news, I remember just praying that we would get through this, and that we would come stronger because of it, and the people that really mattered in my life would be shown. So, yeah, I would say it definitely threw a wrench in my plans for sure. I was planning on going to Sam Houston State, go Bearcats, in Huntsville, Texas, and because I want to do criminal justice, and they're like the number one place to go in the U.S. if you want to do criminal justice. It's a really cool campus. They have like a prison there. It's really dope. But yeah, so I mean, there was a prison break there one time, but that's a story for another day. I could fill you in on. So yeah, and after that happened, I was just like, okay, I'm done with trying to get to Sam Houston. This is already a lot of work as it is. Like, I just lost my dad, and so I'm like, okay, we're done. And my mom was even the same way, and even like a lot of my mentors were like, you know what, Will, let's put this on the back burner. Like, let's not worry about this. So I got through senior year, okay. I'm very thankful that I was at the school I was, because my teachers were very understanding, and were just like, and even the president was. I mean, she was like, yeah, Will, like, you just come back whenever you're ready, and like if you don't want to come back, that's okay. You can do online for the rest of the semester. I came back because community is important, and my mom was like, okay, like, let's go, Will. So, yeah, I got through it. It was weird graduating, not having him there, because like, something you'll know about me is me and my dad were like best buds. Like, even in that weird teenage era where you're like, oh, I hate my parents, I still like wanted to do stuff and go hang out with my dad, or like if dad was going to the store, I'd ask to see if he'd come along. And I think that just started because even when I was younger, he would always like include me and James, my brother, and be like, hey, like, you guys want to come to the store with us, whatever. So yeah, and then so we get through the summer. The summer was actually not too bad. I think it was just because I saw a lot of my friends in my original community. And then August rolled around. And then at this point, they all leave for college, and I'm here and I'm doing TCC. And then all my friends kind of moved away. And I think that was like the first moment I kind of felt, alone, because it kind of like all set in. I was no longer distracted by having people around me. And I started going to Impact here, which I know now I can probably say his name, Tommy Foster. I don't know if y'all know who he is. Yeah, he's great. I met him, actually, one of my good friends goes to him, and he was like, yeah, like, you should try him. I think you would really like him, and he was right. And so Tommy helped me out a lot with that. So now, where are we, September? So obviously, at this point, I'm like, okay, I'm getting back in school, going to counseling, I'm feeling better, starting to understand this whole grief process a lot more. And one thing I'll throw out here is, I don't know, everyone's story, obviously, but if there's something that you're like pre-mourning, if there's someone in your family, that's nearing the end of their life, or you're just pre-mourning, or even if you have an unexpected loss, sorry, that scared me too. I saw it. Grief is complex. and there's no straight path. And there's going to be times where you're like, ugh, this is really dumb. I wish it would go away. You can hide it, but it is not smart. I can say from experience as somebody who thankfully didn't struggle with that a lot, that just letting the emotions happen and having that person that you can go to and talk to is huge. Like, I can't even begin to explain. It definitely helps a lot, and you can use it and be like me and stand up here and give wisdom and whatnot. So, so then September rolls around, and then of course my brother for like a week was having some, at the time we thought it was dehydration issues, and he had gotten like really ghostly pale. We didn't really know why. We took him to the emergency room, and then he got ghostly pale again, like the second week, so we took him back to the hospital. So the first time we went, they're like, oh, he's just dehydrated. Popped him in gave him some fluids, and he was actually better. And then he went back the second time, and they're like, okay, something's wrong here. He was here a week ago. Let's figure out. So it was literally like, any doctor show, like House MD or like Grey's Anatomy, and they were like running tests like all day. And come to find out, he had developed a rare form of sarcoma, which is a cancer, on his left lung. And he doesn't smoke. Parents have never smoked. Don't know why it was there. The doctors believe that it had been there for probably about a year and a half, and for whatever reason, it just decided to cause issues right there. Again, that's the second thing that doesn't make sense. It's like, why does my brother, who's never smoked or never been in any kind of bad air environment, get lung cancer? So that was a lot really hard on my mom. And turns out, I'm glad I ended up going. It was a good thing that I decided to go to TCC, because I really got to be there for my mom. And either way, I probably would have ended up coming home, even if I did go to Sam Houston State. So I really just got to be there for my mom and really just kind of be that stable person in the household. I guess you could say I'm so sorry. I don't know why it's doing this. Anyways. Yeah, exactly. Okay. I don't know why. It's fine. I think it's because I'm hitting the chair. It's fine. I'll scoot up. Okay. Where was I? Yes. Let's see. Sorry, the booms caught me off guard. Being there for my mom. So, and then there were also some people in my family that were like, well, maybe TCC isn't the best. Like, maybe you should do college. And there was just like a lot of, I wouldn't say fighting, but there was definitely a lot of conflict of interest at this time, which is fair. Like, 4-year college degree is good to have, but it just like wasn't the timing. And come to find out later, so James gets radiation treatment, chemo. Well, first he goes through chemo, and that was really hard on my mom. I think through this whole story, I think the hardest part in my life would probably be from that little section from September up until probably midsummer. And so it was just a lot with James, and I'm really glad I got to stay because I got to spend more time with my mom. We got to do some stuff and watch the Rangers win the World Series. So that was really good. And I got to spend really good quality time with my mom and learn a lot more about her than what I have. Because something I've noticed talking to people is, especially like, with us and parents, is, and I don't know if everyone's like this, but the majority of people I've talked to are like this, is they usually have that one parent that they really lean on heavily, and then that other parent is just kind of there, like, hey, like, I know you're my mom. So like in my instance, it's like, I really love my dad. It's like, I love my mom too, but like, I know, you're just my mom. So that was really good. I got to learn more about my mom and everything. So yeah. So then fast forward, let's see. We're now in April. So James got his surgery. He's doing good. They ended up having to take out his whole left lung. He's just on radiation treatment now, which he'll be done probably like next week, I think. So whoop, whoop. And then he'll be considered in remission, and he'll be all good. So that's exciting. So in April, I guess 17th, I'm getting ready to go on the Mad Morris men's trip. I was super excited. But the night before, my mom had this freak panic attack. And so they took her to the hospital, and I remember going there, and just being with my mom for like about 2 hours. And, we were just chatting or whatever. And she was like, yeah, like I feel better. They're going to move me into a room and I'll be discharged tomorrow. And at this point, she was still in the ER. So I was like, I got to get up early at like 4 a.m. tomorrow. So I'll see you tomorrow. And so, yeah, she called me, I guess, about 11 o'clock that night and was like, hey, I'm in a room. And I was like, okay, let's get someone to take you home tomorrow, probably your brother or whatever. And so, yeah, I told her I loved her. We told each other we loved her. And those were the last words I said to her. Because about 8 o'clock the next morning, okay, let me back up a little bit. So I got up and I went on the men's trip. And I just remember having this weird feeling of like something's off. But I couldn't quite put my finger on it. If it was just like, is it because I'm leaving for a men's trip while my mom's still in the hospital? Or is it just like because I'm like the only youngest person here by like 20 years on this men's trip? So, and then I guess about 8 o'clock that morning, mom suddenly passed away from low blood pressure. And we found this out because when my uncle was going to pick her up, they were trying to get hold of my dad, who I guess mom didn't update her emergency contact information. So that was interesting. So she passed away about 8 a.m. that morning from low blood pressure, and the doctors were as shocked as everyone else was, because she was the person that we were least worried about. And she was in the middle of filling out paperwork, and God just called her home. So that's like the third thing that really doesn't make sense in my life. So, our third big thing. So I guess, okay, so why am I telling you all this? So I guess the first thing, some takeaways, is so through all this, so after my mom died, I really hit I guess I would consider my rock bottom, where I just really felt like I had nothing going for me. So at this point, I didn't know I was going to DBU. There wasn't really a job that I really liked, that I was interested in. And I was thinking about going back to TCC, and I just really didn't know what I was going to do. I was really just a lost Israelite, in the desert. God had pulled me out from, whatever, and now I'm just here, and I'm like, okay, where am I going? And then, so I was talking to Tommy, and Tommy brought up a good point. He was like, okay, well, let's backtrack here, and let's see where you've come. And so this is something that whenever it gets hard for y'all, is whenever it gets hard, try and look back, even if it's something minor, the positive steps you take. So what he told me, first example is, okay, so after my father passed, what happened? Okay, so I go to TCC, and then I find this college group. Okay, cool. Then my brother gets cancer. So then what's the next big step? I get an internship. Cool. And then after my mom, internship, and then we take another step forward. I'm getting connected into this new church, and then now I'm about to go on this mission trip. So those are two good steps. And then right after my mom passed away, he was like, well, why can't we keep moving forward? Let's look at some things. And then that's when he recommended, he's like, let's try DBU. Because just with your story and just what you've been through, I think you really have a chance. I mean, he's obviously right. Find out, I guess, middle of summer, I get accepted to DBU, and I'm able to go there. So go Pats. I shared them my story, and they were all really moved by what I had gone through, and that's how I was able to do that. So yeah, really the Lord provides, and that's the big thing, is he was able to move me, even though it wasn't looking as linear as I thought I was, as I was still moving forward, and even he was giving me new friends, new community. So yeah, that's the first big thing. The second one is path in life is not always as linear. Give me a second. So I apologize. I wish I had this first pulled up. So let's see. Yeah, okay. So the verse to back this up of God providing, if you want to, is Philippians 4:19. I know I said we'd be hanging out in the Psalms and Proverbs. I know I threw a curveball at you, but Philippians 4:19 tells us, and God will supply every need of yours according to his riches and glory in Christ Jesus. Or there's another translation, therefore, my brothers, whom I love and long for, my joy and crown, stand firm, thus in the Lord, my beloved. So there's two little translations there for you. Or I guess that's Philippians 4:1. I apologize. But, so that's the big verse that kind of backs that up. So another way you provide is family. Like, I feel like our family really came together there. We were really helping each other out, getting James to his chemo treatments and looking out for mom and looking out for me. And we were just all there for each other. So that was really beautiful to see happen. Let's see. Okay. I apologize. I'm flipping through my notes here. Okay, so I remember during the time of when my mom passed, through all the chaos, because there were a lot of people who knew I was in this mission trip, and we were about 30 minutes from the border, and there were a lot of people that were really worried about getting me home. And I just remember in this chaos, I felt really calm. And I felt, even though it's like I was being bombarded with text and like phone calls of like, hey, Will, like, how are you going to get home? Do you have a ride? Do you need, someone to come get you or whatever? I'm so sorry. And I just felt really calm. And the only way I could describe that is something, it came from the Lord. Because there's no other way. Like, I just found out my mom passed away, and I'm 6 hours away from home. Like, there's really no good reason why I should feel calm. But I do. And I think the only way to describe that is through the Lord. And he was able to give me patience, and I was able to think clearly. Another good one is, in life, you're going to have like yellow lights, and not necessarily red lights, maybe more detours. And much like an intersection, I know I do it too sometimes, you shouldn't really speed through, right? Because you're at risk of hurting yourself or hurting others, or both. And so what do I mean by this? Well, during my time of all this loss is I remember, I wasn't trying to still stay on my path of like trying to go to Sam Houston or wherever, because I think I would have done myself a lot more harm than good, especially since I was still trying to process death of my father, and then like trying to move to a new environment would have been crazy. So, like, it's okay. And I know it's like busyness of college. It's pretty crazy to hear. But like, it's okay sometimes, especially if you've gone through something great like that. It's okay to slow down and just like really digest it. Yeah, so like, especially if you've gone through something great, like I would not recommend it to still try and live life like it's normal, because it's not. So you're just going to have like stop and goes in life, and it's just going to happen. And there's nothing you can do about it. And the best way I would explain it is to just kind of just go with the flow. I know that people aren't really like that, but that's the best advice that I feel like I could give to you with that. And especially like there's going to be points in your life where God is going to be like this. So like a good example with me is like, instead of going to a 4-year right away, I went to a 2-year. Took some classes. It was a little more chill. And in that, the Lord was able to provide that I got to spend more time with my family, and I got to spend more time with my mom that I wouldn't have if I decided to go to a 4-year. And I'm very grateful for that, for sure. So where am I now? Well, I definitely feel like I've learned a lot, and I have a lot more appreciation for what God does, and a lot more appreciation for just like life and just adult people in my life. Because I felt like through a lot of that, the people that poured into me the most were definitely adults. And it wasn't like they were super controlling or, super like ignorant of the fact of what I have gone through. And they gave very good, like Christ-like advice And actually, I told one of my mentors I was going to TCC, and he was super ecstatic, and he told me the same thing that I'm telling y'all now, of like, yeah, like, you know, you get to now spend more time with your family, and trying to transition to a 4-year after you've lost your father is not smart because there's a lot of environmental changes. So yeah, and so now I'm here, and let's see. Sorry, I lost my train of thought there again. I apologize. And yeah, so what have I learned now? Yeah, the Lord provides, and He's definitely my source of strength and joy. And that if you trust in God, He can do all things. And that if you really just like give your life over to God, and even at sometimes if it does sound a little crazy, it'll be okay, and it'll be worth it, because I can say I trusted what God wanted for me, and He gave me. I would say I was able to benefit from it because I got to spend more time with my mom. And I got to appreciate more time with her, and be there for my brother. And yeah, so trusting the Lord and His plan is worth it, and it's rewarding. And sometimes it won't always look that way, but it'll be revealed for you for sure. So yeah, that's my testimony. So.
Thanks, Will. Thank you so much for sharing that. We got to talk and kind of hang out and meet before he shared his testimony. And one thing that stood out to me about his story was there's so many complex twists and turns. And he's already learned some things, but I told him what's neat is we're going to get to watch what the Lord does 2 years from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now with his story. Because a story like his, where he loses parents within 1 year of each other, and whose brother goes through something as terrible as he went through, the Lord has something for him. And I know that for a fact. And what's neat is I know whenever I lose my parents one day, I can go to him and say, hey, I lost my mom, I lost my dad. What do I need to do? And he can help me through what he went through. And that's one thing I wanted to share with you guys is the hard stuff that you have gone through so far. You may say it's not fair, and it's true, it's not fair that something as terrible as that happened to him. But what is true is the Lord promises to use it for His glory and good. And so what if we dare to trust that God will do that? What if we dare to believe God is who He says He is? And that's one thing I've learned from reading Scripture is there's so much about who the Lord says He is and who He says we are, and it's all there accessible for us. Yet we choose to suffer without it. We choose to suffer without seeing all the truth in there, and we choose to believe what is not in there. And so one thing I've challenged myself, I shared this with you last week, I've challenged myself to dare to believe who I am in Christ and who I am in the Lord. And what if we as a community decided to do that? What kind of things would the Lord unlock in His kingdom for us to do together, and then to do for whoever comes into our community? Because one thing I've said about this community is we will be few, but we will be faithful. And it is okay for us to be few, because I know there's tons of big college groups in the area, and they're doing great things, and I bless them. And we bless all the other churches in the area. But this is the community that the Lord's given us to steward, and us to spend time with, and us to build with. And so with that, I will, and I'm being challenged as a leader to be a little bit more bold with this, but to look you in the eye when you're telling me something and say, hey, have you asked the Lord who He says you are? And are you going to dare and be defiant to the enemy and say, I am not who you say I am? Because, Ed Lemans talks about the enemy plants thoughts in our heads all throughout the day, and where we differentiate between what are the enemy's thoughts and the Lord's thoughts is reading this, is studying this, is knowing this. You will be able to differentiate between what is the enemy's thoughts and what is the Lord's thoughts by reading this. This is, I guarantee you, know this, make this your guide. And anything that's going on in your life where you're like, I don't know what to do, make this your guide, just like Will did, where he's like, you know what? I'm going to trust God's plan, even when it doesn't make sense. And the worst case scenario is that you're closer to God. And so, like I say, we are a community that wants to prioritize God's presence. We will choose to trust God. And I believe in our faithfulness to trusting God and choosing to prioritize his presence. The Lord will use us, our group, as small as we are, as faithful as we are, to change the trajectory of a lot of people's lives. And that's why this semester I'm challenging you guys to pray and ask that the Lord bring one person in your life that you can befriend who doesn't know him, or may also just be questioning about who he is. One person. It really just takes one person. Because that is the ministry of multiplication. Jesus didn't multiply with hundreds. He multiplied with 12, but then even smaller than that, 3. And with those 12, he multiplied to thousands, and here we are. I mean, when you think about it, we are here because the 12 were faithful, not 12, 11, because we know Judas, but they were faithful to Jesus. Because of that faithfulness, then there are thousands of Christians all over the world, because this is how we exist. And so think about this. If us 15 or so are faithful to following the word of God and pursuing people to love them like Jesus loves them, and I'll be talking a little bit about that next week. I have a little bit of my own personal strategy, philosophy of how to pursue people. And it's applicable not just for an extrovert like me, but for an introvert. And so, because I honestly think that in some ways I'm an introvert. So I know that's hard to believe, but that's what I want to teach you next week, is how to pursue people and how to do so and how to develop your own pursuing strategy, because it is hard. It is very difficult for us in this age to go and pursue a new person. But I promise you that when you do that and you choose to love somebody you don't know, I know I've never regretted it, because I've been blessed by people that I never thought I'd be blessed by. I've been blessed by non-believers before who anyways, I'll talk about next week. I don't want to give the sermon now, but I'll talk about next week how to pursue people. And do you guys have one more song for us? Cool. Will you guys end us in a song? Thank you so much, Will. You killed it. I know it was brave of you to come and share a story like this, as fresh as it. When he says April, it was April of this year, so not that long ago. So thank you so much, Will, for opening up a little bit of your woundedness, showing us your heart for the Lord in this.